And turning now to TikTok, with a deadline for the sale of the popular social media app fast approaching and uncertainty once again mounting around what happens if a deal can't be made. Remember, back in January, President Trump extended the deadline for TikTok to find an American buyer, requiring the sale of the app by this Saturday. Yesterday, while speaking to reporters on Air Force One, President Trump appeared confident that there would be a deal.
A lot of potential buyers. There's tremendous interest in TikTok. The decision's going to be my decision. TikTok is it's very interesting. A lot of people want to buy it.
If no deal, will you extend the deadline?
Oh, there'll be a deal with TikTok.
And joining me now is Savannah Sellers, our TikTok expert. Savannah, it's so good to have you here. Okay, so what is the status of this potential deal?
Yeah, Gabe, I mean, listen, we have the president saying that. We had Vice President Vance, who has sort of been quarterbacking this whole thing, telling NBC News a little over a week ago that he also thinks it's going to get done. What we think will end up happening is that this week we will have an idea of essentially who wins the deal. We think we'll know at least that much. Now, details, those might not be papered yet. Maybe there's an extension on that piece of things to kind of hammer some of this out. But we do think we'll at least have the headline of who is going to actually get to kind of be a part of buying TikTok, or at least some of it. Now, the big names that we're hearing right now, you might have heard a little bit about Larry Ellison of Oracle. His name is being thrown around. What we think could happen if he were to be part of a deal is that he sort of joins in with existing U.S. investors who could potentially take a larger stake than they currently have, essentially to sort of boot out the Chinese investors. They'd all just kind of take over a larger stake and have people like Larry Ellison of Oracle join in. That seems like it would make a lot of sense given the fact that TikTok and Oracle already have this working relationship. TikTok essentially works in the U.S. because of Oracle hosting its data. Also, back in January, President Trump had said he'd love if Larry were to buy TikTok. So that could be a reason there. Blackstone also, that name floated to join in that same group. But then we also have other bidders who are not part of that group. Reed Reisner, a Wyoming billionaire, $50 billion raised. He's still in there. Frank McCourt and Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank. A lot of people, as the president said, interested in buying TikTok, Gabe.
So, Savannah, President Trump has floated the idea of easing tariffs on China in exchange for a deal. Do you know if that's swaying Beijing at all?
Yeah, Gabe, it's a great question. And to be honest with you, it was one that our team had been kind of waiting to see if we would hear a connection between these two things. And then you're exactly right. He said it directly. Last week, President Trump said he would consider giving China a little reduction in tariffs, was what he said, if they were to push a TikTok deal through. Because our understanding right now is that the Trump administration is speaking directly with the Chinese government about what could happen here, which would make a lot of sense that it's sort of tied up with tariff talk. ByteDance, not so much at the negotiating table, it doesn't seem, with a lot of these conversations, even though it's them selling that company. So we will see if tariffs end up kind of tied up in the middle of this whole TikTok thing, as it's a big deal with China, Gabe.
Savannah Sellers, we know you'll stay on top of it for us. Savannah, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.